We've all felt it. That moment when a glance shifts, when a voice on the other end no longer carries respect. Not because we did something wrong, but somewhere along the way, we let go of ourselves. Respect doesn't vanish overnight. It fades with each silence when we should have spoken, with every nod meant to please, even as our inner voice screamed, with every time we chose comfort over truth. There's a hard truth we must face. Women don't respect words or promises. They respect boundaries. They sense whether a man lives in alignment with his values or merely bends to the world to avoid being left behind. Today, we don't chase respect. We become it. 1. Never reward disrespect. Disrespect in relationships rarely begins with something overt or obvious. It often starts subtly. A mocking joke, a contemptuous glance, a small act that contradicts the values you once made clear. But what matters most isn't the act itself. It's how you respond. In those first moments, you stand between two choices: stay silent to keep the peace, or speak up to keep yourself. Most people, fearing conflict, craving approval, or lacking clarity about their own values, choose silence. What they fail to see is this: silence isn't harmless. It's tacit consent, a quiet collusion with what follows. Because humans, especially in close relationships, don't just communicate with words, but with behavior. When a misstep goes unchallenged, it is not seen as wrong. And by psychological law, what isn't corrected tends to repeat and escalate. The shrug you ignore today becomes open disregard tomorrow. The tasteless joke becomes habitual disrespect. Women, like all people, judge not just appearances or words, but the ability to hold boundaries. A man who does not respond to disrespect is soon seen as one without standards, without spine, and loses the magnetism that comes from self-possession. Because at our core, we all respect those who know who they are and refuse to let others define their worth. The irony is, the more forgiving you are, the more easily you're exploited. The more you try to be the nice guy, the easier you become a target for control, contempt, and repeated boundary testing. Not because others are cruel, but because you've taught them that you have no clear limits. Respect is not born from appeasement, but from firmness. It doesn't come from yielding to others' wishes, but from standing firm in what you know to be right. When you stay silent in the face of insult, you place your desire for comfort above your personal values. But that peace is fleeting. The collapse within is quiet and inevitable. Disrespect isn't always malicious. Sometimes it's an unconscious test, a word thrown to see how you react, an act to gauge your tolerance. And when no boundary is set, the message is clear. This can continue, can go further. No need to adjust, because you didn't require it. Value isn't declared, it's enforced. If crossing a line bears no consequence, that line doesn't truly exist. And once someone learns they can violate boundaries without repercussion, respect evaporates, though civility and soft words may remain. This holds especially true in romantic relationships where emotions delay action. Many men believe that letting it go once, compromising a little, will show goodwill and inspire change. But the opposite is true. Compromise without principle is perceived as weakness, and weakness, even when rooted in love, breeds loss of respect. So when we say every silence toward disrespect is consent, it's not a metaphor, it's psychological fact. In every small act, allowing interruptions, smiling off insults, staying in touch despite being belittled. You rewrite the standard for how others treat you. You cannot expect others to respect you if you don't enforce your own limits. And nothing asserts self-respect more powerfully than saying enough, not with anger, but with calm, decisive action. True respect doesn't come from making others happy. It comes from making it clear that if someone wants a place in your life, they must abide by non-negotiable principles. And the first, most basic of those is, no one has the right to treat you as if you lack worth. In all relationships, romantic, friendly, professional, people often stay more out of fear of loss than love. It's driven by fear of uncertainty, of starting over, or the false belief that leaving equals failure. But leaving is not always weakness or impatience. Often, it's the highest act of self-respect and maturity. Staying in a toxic relationship doesn't make you noble or kind. It just shows that you've placed your value below emotional convenience. Anger may make someone leave in a flash, but only self-respect makes them walk away in silence and never look back. Anger is impulsive, unstable. Self-respect is deliberate, grounded in long-held principles. Those who leave feud of self-respect need no victim role. They don't lash out, blame, or explain. They don't prove anything to anyone. Their departure isn't meant to hurt. It's simply to stop being hurt. It's a quiet act, but it carries weight. It says, I know what I deserve, and this isn't it. Others may not understand your reasons. They may call it cold, uncaring, or selfish. But what matters isn't how they interpret your action, but the truth behind it. When someone walks away from what's no longer healthy, they choose inner integrity over external approval. Stoicism teaches, we cannot control how others treat us, but we can control whether we allow it to continue. The strongest response to disrespect is not threats or debates, it's withdrawal. And if that retreat is silent and free of resentment, it carries more power than any rebuke. Leaving is not shirking responsibility, it's reclaiming authority over your life. It's the act of someone who knows no one defines their worth but themselves. When others no longer behave accordingly, the relationship becomes imbalanced, and staying only prolongs injustice. True affection never demands that someone sacrifice self-respect to maintain it. A relationship that survives only when one party lowers their standards isn't love, it's dependency. And dependency cannot coexist with respect. When respect is gone, all that remains is obligation, habit, or fear. Some cling to relationships believing they can change the other. But no one changes under persuasion or pressure. Real change comes only when one sees the consequences of their actions. And none is clearer than being left behind by someone unwilling to tolerate more. To leave when disrespected is not just a personal choice, it's a standard. When you allow behavior without consequence, you teach others you don't deserve better. But when you walk away, you send an unmistakable message. Your value is not up for negotiation. This doesn't mean leaving at every conflict. All relationships involve friction and require communication. But when disrespect becomes the norm, not the exception, when your boundaries are repeatedly violated despite your voice, then staying is no longer patience. It's self-abandonment. When you walk away with dignity, you owe no promises of return. You leave no door open, because your exit isn't a strategy to change them. It's a decision to honor yourself. And if one day they realize your worth, that's their lesson, not your duty. If they never do, it only proves you were right to leave. 2. Guard inner peace. Like a warrior defends a fortress. In both modern psychology and classical philosophy like Stoicism, inner peace is never viewed as a default state that we passively possess. Rather, it is understood as a result, a spiritual achievement built through discipline, self-awareness, and deliberate choice. Peace does not come from avoiding conflict, nor is it the silence that masks injustice. It is not some artificial emotional stillness where feelings are suppressed. Instead, inner peace is the ability to maintain mental equilibrium, regardless of how the external world shifts. And to reach that state requires an exceptional degree of personal discipline in thought, behavior, and relationships. The first discipline is mental discipline. The average person has tens of thousands of thoughts per day, most of them negative, repetitive, and unchecked. Letting the mind wander, pulled by anxieties not rooted in the present, breeds inner chaos. One who cannot govern their thoughts is easily consumed by worry, envy, suspicion, driven by impulse, not reason. Training the mind to think purposefully, to focus on what is within our control, as Stoicism teaches, is the foundation of inner stillness. The next is behavioral discipline, how you choose to spend your time and energy. A vague schedule, chronic procrastination, and the habit of consuming toxic information from social media, sensational news, etc., slowly erode your ability to remain peaceful. In a world overloaded with stimuli, the undisciplined mind becomes overwhelmed, leading to stress, anxiety, and emotional volatility. Another essential aspect is selection of people and of circumstances. Every person you allow into your life is an influence agent, for better or worse. Negative, complaining, boundaryless people unconsciously drag you into their chaos. Meanwhile, principled, focused, emotionally balanced individuals help you remain centered. Choosing your company, then, is not just social advice. It is a strategy for mental survival. Selection also includes what you feed your mind. If you spend hours each day scrolling through alarming or shallow content, you rewire your brain to meet the world with fear, anger, and suspicion. Conversely, exposure to uplifting, thoughtful, morally grounded material, like enduring philosophies or ethical teachings, elevates your awareness and protects you from the storm outside. Peace is also the result of setting and defending personal boundaries. One who cannot say no will constantly be invaded, time, energy, focus, all compromised. Every time you agree to something you don't want, just to please, you trade peace for temporary approval. But that trade is endless. Without boundaries, you are absorbed into others' needs and moods until you no longer recognize your own. In Stoic practice, a core principle is distinguishing between what is and isn't under our control. When you understand this clearly, you stop trying to change others, stop reacting to every word, stop fighting what's beyond your reach. This is more than logic. It's the first step to serenity. Because the greatest unrest comes from trying to grasp the ungraspable, fix what isn't yours, and avoid what must be faced. Ultimately, peace is not a goal to chase. It is the natural result of a life governed by discipline, selection, and integrity. The truly peaceful person isn't one who avoids storms, but who remains steady within them. In a turbulent world, the person with a calm interior holds the greatest power, not to dominate others, but to remain untouched by their chaos. Humans are born unable to control their surroundings, but always with the potential to control their responses. Yet this potential is not automatic. It must be cultivated through willpower, awareness, and personal discipline. Without inner peace, a person is easily swayed by external events, by words, behaviors, and the randomness of daily life. This dependency creates a passive life, where control is surrendered and identity shaped by circumstance. A person lacking inner calm lives in reaction, not initiative. They flare with anger when criticized, are wounded by rejection, and their moods swing wildly with others' actions. One negative comment ruins their day. An unanswered message ignites a storm of insecurity. They're caught in an emotional game they do not control. This state weakens not only performance and relationships, but also erodes self-worth. One without stillness feels ungrounded, forever seeking validation from the outside. They depend on praise, approval, or positive attention to feel valuable. When those are absent, they spiral into anxiety and doubt. Lack of inner peace also makes one an easy target for manipulation. When you live in reaction, others can guide you through emotional tactics, provocation, or challenge. In relationships, this is dangerous because those without inner steadiness easily submit, tolerate control, and excuse disrespect out of fear of loss. Psychologically, emotional instability traps individuals in repetitive negative cycles, explosive anger, withdrawal, impulsivity, or even depression. These responses aren't about the current moment, but accumulated emotional clutter left unprocessed. When the inner world is disorderly, any small external trigger becomes an explosion point. Without inner peace, decision-making suffers. A mind fogged by emotion loses clarity, leading to poor choices in relationships, work, and life. One reacts instead of plans, avoids instead of confronts. In time, they become the architect of their own suffering. Moreover, without peace, one is vulnerable to broader social forces, peer pressure, curated online images, false success standards, public controversy. They cease to be individuals and become absorbed in the noise of the crowd. They no longer live by what they believe, but by what others approve. This leads to confusion, loss of identity, and the erosion of authenticity. The most tragic part is this: those lacking inner peace often don't realize they are controlled. They explain their reactions by pointing outward. I'm angry because they're terrible. I'm sad because she's silent. I'm worried because society is unstable. These may be true, but they are not the root cause. The real cause lies in a mind not built on firm ground, but entirely at the mercy of events. Stoicism roots inner peace in the clear distinction between what is within your control and what is not. Without this, the world appears hostile, everyone a threat, every situation a trap. One ceases to live as a free human and becomes a passive victim, constantly reacting, defending, fearing. In the end, the greatest cost of a restless mind is the inability to live fully. When the mind is filled with reactions to the outside, there's no space left for creativity, deep thought, or genuine connection. Life becomes a chain of survival, not conscious living. And the true tragedy is not what is lost, but that one never lived up to their potential, all for lack of one seemingly simple thing: peace from within. 3. Don't share every emotion. choose selectively, like a masterful storyteller. In social dynamics, and especially in relationships between men and women, mystery plays a critical role in forming and sustaining personal magnetism. Human nature is drawn to what it doesn't fully understand. Curiosity is a powerful psychological force that drives us to approach, explore, and connect. In that context, emotional restraint becomes not just a tactic for building attraction, but a long-term strategy for maintaining respect. When someone reveals their entire inner world, too soon, too fast, or too fully, it can have the opposite effect, diminishing their allure. The problem isn't the emotions themselves, but how they're delivered. Full exposure removes the incentive to explore. When every shadow, scar, and fear is laid bare from the outset, the relationship loses the element of discovery, an essential ingredient in sustained interest. Psychologically, we tend to value what requires effort to access. Information handed over too easily is often devalued. This is why, in communication, holding back, especially with emotional content, compels others to invest more effort in understanding you, in gaining access to your interior life. That investment fosters deeper connection rather than a fleeting surface-level satisfaction. Emotional restraint doesn't mean being dishonest or hiding. It's a strategic act, an expression of self-awareness and emotional navigation. An emotionally mature man understands that not everyone has the capacity to handle his darkest depths. He chooses the right time, setting, and depth to share, not to manipulate, but to honor emotional boundaries and preserve equilibrium within the relationship. This is especially vital in romantic contexts. A person can quickly shift from a companion to an emotional caretaker if constantly expected to absorb unfiltered pain, insecurity, or turbulence. When this happens, the bond ceases to be between equals. It becomes one-sided, where one offers stability and the other continually discharges instability. Over time, this imbalance corrodes emotional intimacy and replaces it with obligation, fatigue, and even resentment. Restraint also reflects inner mastery, a cornerstone of Stoicism. A Stoic does not extinguish emotion, but channels it wisely. Rather than reacting publicly with vulnerability or distress, they process internally and speak only when necessary. This self-control radiates a unique energy, grounded, calm, unshakable. And it is this energy that earns true respect and enduring connection. Oversharing emotions too early also distorts the natural rhythm of relational development. Trust, understanding, and emotional grounding require time. When someone rushes to share the deepest parts of themselves before a solid foundation exists, the listener may not be prepared to hold that space. This leads to emotional overload, leaving the listener overwhelmed, confused, or even retreating. From a sociological perspective, in cultures that value composure and personal agency, emotional restraint is seen as strength, not coldness. A person who doesn't broadcast every feeling isn't repressed. They're organized. This earns respect and protects psychological autonomy, free from being emotionally dependent on others' reactions. What's vital to remember is, not all emotions need immediate expression. Some must first be observed, reflected upon, and refined in silence. Unprocessed pain can burden others if shared prematurely, and some joys, kept briefly to oneself, become more sacred and memorable when shared at the right moment. Ultimately, Attraction doesn't come from expressing everything you think or feel. It comes from discernment, from knowing what to hold back and what to reveal. When people feel they must earn your trust, must work to access your true feelings, they value you more. And in that unfolding journey, a relationship of depth and truth can form. Emotions are intrinsic to the human experience. We connect through feelings, joy, sadness, anger, fear. Sharing them is natural in any healthy relationship. But sharing without awareness or boundaries creates emotional overload, especially when it's constant, unresolved, and offloaded without personal accountability. Psychology affirms that emotional expression facilitates connection and relief. But its benefit depends on three things: self-awareness, emotional regulation, and respect for others' emotional space. Without these, expression becomes projection, pressure, or passive pleas for rescue, leaving the listener burdened with the expectation to fix or absorb what is not theirs. In romantic relationships, especially early on, both partners are emotional companions. But if one repeatedly unloads negativity without self-regulation or the desire to change, or without regard for the partner's own emotional needs, the balance collapses. One becomes the dumping ground, the other, the emotional sponge. Eventually, this drains affection and mutual respect. Repeated one-sided emotional unloading, especially of sadness, frustration, anger, or anxiety, traps the listener in an emotional vortex. They become defensive, distant, or disengaged, not from lack of care, but from emotional exhaustion. The withdrawal is not rejection, it's self-preservation. This burdening of others with unfiltered emotion rarely stems from malice. Often it's habitual, a lack of awareness. The sharer unconsciously treats the other person as their sole emotional outlet, without accepting responsibility for what's going on inside. When emotions are dumped without consideration for timing, setting, or readiness, the sharer imposes a silent obligation to listen, to understand, to endure. It becomes worse when the sharer believes speaking is enough to feel better, while the listener walks away heavier. The emotional scale tips. One feels like a therapist, not a partner. Over time, this degrades connection, equality, and individual freedom within the relationship. From a personal growth standpoint, lack of emotional control reveals a gap in emotional maturity. Emotionally mature people understand that their feelings are theirs to process first. Others are not release valves, but partners in empathy. When something feels off inside, they observe, analyze, and self-regulate, sharing only when stable or when genuine support is needed, not to discharge, but to bond. Responsible sharing means considering the listener's capacity. Are they emotionally available? Are they facing their own challenges? Have they agreed to engage? Respecting the mental space of others is a sign of maturity and the basis of any healthy bond. Ignoring this becomes an invisible invasion, unspoken, yet weighty. The solution isn't to suppress all emotion, but to share with precision, the right time, the right person, the right extent. In Stoicism, emotions aren't denied, but transformed. Practitioners know that timely silence holds more power than 1,000 laments. When emotion is distilled, polished, and shared with awareness and composure, it ceases to be a burden and becomes a bridge between souls. In conclusion, emotional sharing is essential, but without calibration, it easily crosses into burdening. A relationship endures only when both individuals manage their inner world before expecting others to carry it for them. And in this chaotic world, the ability to govern one's emotional landscape is not just a relationship skill. It is the foundation of inner freedom and personal dignity. 4. Don't react emotionally. Respond rationally. Humans are emotional creatures. Since prehistoric times, immediate reactions to external threats, anger in danger, fear in peril, sorrow in loss, helped our ancestors survive. These responses are hardwired into our biology. The sympathetic nervous system kicks in swiftly to protect us. But in the modern world, where threats come not from predators or survival rivals, but from words, glances, and complex social situations, reacting emotionally becomes a weakness, not a strength. The difference between reacting and responding isn't just timing, it's consciousness. A reaction is fast, impulsive, emotionally charged, and unconcerned with long-term consequences. A response is deliberate, thought out, and chosen. Reaction is instinct. Response is reason refined. We react when we feel attacked, hurt, or insulted, often with defensiveness or aggression. A response, on the other hand, reflects control, purpose, and the ability to steer a situation toward a wiser outcome. In Stoic philosophy, mastering emotional reactions is a hallmark of inner strength. Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus emphasized the mind as the root of personal freedom. They didn't deny emotion. They taught that emotion must be recognized, analyzed, and governed by reason. He who cannot master his reactions is a servant to circumstance, easily provoked, easily led, ultimately stripped of autonomy. From neuroscience, we understand the brain processes stimuli through two main systems: the emotional system, the limbic system, including the amygdala, source of fight or flight, and the rational system, the prefrontal cortex, seat of logic, decision-making, and self-control. Under emotional stress, the amygdala dominates, bypassing the rational brain and triggering unfiltered actions. But those who train themselves to pause between stimulus and response re-engage the prefrontal cortex, allowing reason to guide their behavior. In daily life, the difference is clearest in conflict. When criticized, reactive people instantly defend, attack, or justify. They see disagreement as war. Those who respond listen, observe, and analyze the speaker's intent and the context, responding only if necessary. They understand not every situation deserves a response, and not every silence is surrender. Responding rationally doesn't mean suppressing emotions into numbness. It means recognizing emotions precisely. Self-mastery is knowing when you're angry, anxious, or hurt, but refusing to be ruled by those feelings. Emotions are signals, not commands. In that awareness, you retain choice, perhaps to speak, perhaps not, but always led by reason, not impulse. True power is revealed in how one responds when provoked. In tense interactions, people often test others by pushing emotional buttons. Those who react quickly are labeled unstable or weak, but those who respond with calm, who pause before speaking, who reply with focus, command respect. Their silence, their steady gaze, their sharp but measured words, all become tools of influence and strength. Though, in high-pressure moments, arguments, negotiations, public criticism, emotional reactions lead to poor words, rash actions, and long-term damage. One moment of anger can destroy a relationship. One hasty decision can cost deeply, but the ability to delay reaction and convert it into reasoned response allows one to bypass emotional traps and express mature, thoughtful intent. Rational response also preserves inner alignment. Impulsive words or actions often betray personal values, later needing apologies or correction. In contrast, deliberate response protects integrity, letting one act in accordance with principles, not emotions. And that consistency builds trust, both in oneself and from others. In both personal and public life, emotional control is not just a trait, it's a shield. Those who flare up at minor triggers, who swing between highs and lows, who cry out or lash out, are easily led, often without realizing it. For once emotional vulnerability is exposed, control over one's actions quietly slips into the hands of others. Behavioral psychology confirms this. Those prone to emotional reaction over rational thought are predictable and thus manipulable. If someone knows how to push your buttons, they control you. In social dynamics, this is exploitable. From baiting you into outbursts to steering your choices via emotional manipulation, the ability to govern emotion defines power within relationships. In tense environments, the first to lose composure is often the first to lose authority. They are seen as immature, unstable, untrustworthy. In contrast, the composed responder stands firm, earning respect and creating a buffer of strength that deters manipulation. More dangerously, habitual emotional outbursts train others to use those patterns against you. In romantic conflict, if your partner knows that silence or a slight insult will trigger rage, they may use it to gain leverage, deflect blame, or manipulate outcomes. Repetition builds a loop. Your reaction becomes their strategy, and your balance dissolves. In strategic arenas, debates, negotiations, confrontations, emotional reaction weakens arguments. An angry voice dulls the sharpness of logic. Clarity fades under heat. Attacking words replace persuasive ones. Meanwhile, the composed speaker retains verbal precision, reads the opponent clearly, and controls the conversation. They don't react. They lead. Emotional discipline also safeguards against more sophisticated manipulation. In today's world, emotion is weaponized by media, advertising, even by individuals. Outrage, fear, and urgency are tools to direct behavior. Those who can't filter emotional stimuli are swept away by crowds, by campaigns, by psychological tricks. Independent thought vanishes. Frequent emotional outbursts damage self-respect. Each lapse invites regret, apology, and correction. This breeds insecurity, diminishes confidence, and creates constant self-defense. A cycle where one reacts just to feel control, but loses more of it with each reaction. Stoicism teaches that real strength lies not in controlling others, but in self-mastery. The unprovocable man cannot be manipulated. He responds from inner values, not from others' temporary moods. He doesn't need to retaliate to criticism, nor prove himself under attack. His silence is not weakness. It's understanding that every rash reaction is a gift of power to someone else. Moreover, for leaders, parents, mentors, influencers, emotional steadiness is essential. An angry leader breeds fear and dishonesty. An unstable father wounds his children deeply. A reactive public figure spreads chaos, not clarity. In sum, the emotionally reactive are not just vulnerable, they are governable. Every impulsive reply marks a weakness. a door for others to enter and direct your behavior. But those who pause, who observe emotion before acting, who speak with intent, not instinct, are sovereign over their own minds. And that sovereignty is the foundation of all healthy relationships and a life ruled by reason, not fleeting emotion. 5. Always be ready to walk away, not to threaten, but to preserve integrity. In every kind of relationship, romantic, familial, professional, one must choose between holding on to emotional attachments and upholding personal principles. This choice is rarely easy, as emotional bonds offer familiarity, safety, and often a sense of identity. Yet once those relationships begin to violate one's core values or inner boundaries, staying is no longer an act of loyalty or patience. It becomes a compromise against oneself. True loyalty is not about clinging to someone under all circumstances. It is about staying loyal to your identity, to the non-negotiable values you hold sacred. When someone walks away from a relationship that no longer respects those values, they silently declare, "I know who I am, and I will not betray myself just to keep someone else around." This is not a rash decision, but one formed through careful observation, reflection, and a recognition that staying would erode inner integrity. Stoicism teaches that the harmony of word, belief, and action is paramount. When one maintains a relationship that clearly violates personal boundaries, they lose not only the respect of the other person, but also their own self-trust. Each time one compromises out of fear of losing something external, they whisper inwardly, "My values are negotiable for emotion." Over time, this loss isn't just temporary pain, it is a gradual erosion of dignity. The ability to walk away reflects one's level of psychological freedom. A person bound by fear of loneliness, emotional dependence, or social expectation finds it difficult to leave, even when they know the relationship is no longer healthy. In contrast, the self-possessed individual understands that no relationship is worth preserving at the cost of self-betrayal. They do not see walking away as failure, but as the preservation of self-respect. And self-respect cannot be bought with attention, affection, or status. Behaviorally, those willing to walk away break the cycle of dependence. In imbalanced relationships, one side often oversteps, demands, or disregards boundaries without consequence. Repeated enough, the other person unconsciously learns, "I can keep doing this. They won't leave." That's why limitless patience is mistaken for weakness. And so walking away, especially when done calmly, without drama or threats, delivers a powerful psychological message. I do not need to stay, and I do not need you to change for me to feel whole. In society, walking away in defense of one's values also sets a standard. When someone leaves because of ethics, principles, or dignity, they don't just protect themselves, they clarify boundaries for others. Such actions say, "Some things are unacceptable, even at the cost of loss." And that earns respect, perhaps not immediately, but undeniably over time. Walking away requires courage, because humans are drawn to the familiar. Even harmful relationships offer a form of stability. One grows accustomed to managing that type of tension. Leaving means stepping into the unknown, where nothing is guaranteed. But the strong know that the only certainty they need lies not in others, but in themselves. Their ability to remain aligned with their values, even if it means walking alone. In love, leaving to honor one's principles must never be mistaken for revenge or manipulation. It's not meant to induce guilt or provoke change. It's a solo decision, born of the need to protect one's wholeness. When the other party no longer reciprocates respect or acts against the foundational principles laid from the start, staying only extends the injustice. And that injustice isn't just from the other. It's also in continuing to tolerate what one knows should not be accepted. Ultimately, readiness to leave isn't cold or uncaring. It is the highest form of loyalty to oneself. Those who possess it understand that no one, no matter how beloved, has the right to violate the values they deem sacred. And in what seems like loss, they preserve the most precious things: unbroken dignity, unconditional freedom, and resilience untouched by circumstance. In all communication, power doesn't always lie in harsh words or loud action. Often, the most potent messages are delivered through silence. One of the deepest expressions of dignity, resolve, and self-respect is walking away in silence. No argument, no anger, no explanation. It is the absence of words that echoes loudest, forcing the other to confront the consequences without needing to be told. In behavioral psychology, silence isn't merely absence. It's intentional communication. When someone leaves a relationship or environment without blame, threat, or resentment, they demonstrate a quiet form of power, one born of self-awareness and emotional mastery. The silent exit isn't to harm. It signals there's no need to persuade or defend oneself to someone no longer listening or worthy. Stoicism emphasizes autonomy and clear boundaries between what's within our control and what is not. When someone no longer meets basic standards of respect, honesty, or commitment, trying to reason or beg for change is wasted energy. In such cases, silent withdrawal is the highest form of self-mastery. A Stoic need not declare they were hurt or disrespected. Their silence speaks it all. Sociologically, people are most impacted by surprise and disruption. When someone leaves decisively, without warning or elaborate reasoning, it creates a psychological incompletion, a discomfort that forces reflection. With no argument to rebut and no accusation to deflect, the only thing left is facing oneself. That's what makes silence more piercing than any blame. Furthermore, in relationships where respect has been eroded by control, manipulation, or disregard, a silent exit draws a boundary more clearly than conflict ever could. Those who know their worth seek no external validation. Value isn't proven through argument. It's demonstrated by living true to one's principles. And sometimes, the strongest act is to leave quietly. No explanation, no resistance. Silence preserves integrity. Often, when people try to explain their departure, the conversation devolves into blame, defense, or escalation, damaging the dignity of both. Emotions distort intentions, and even genuine words get misunderstood or twisted. But silence allows both sides to retain dignity and gives space for genuine reflection without coercion. From a personal standpoint, the silent exit is chosen by those unwilling to be pulled into negativity. When betrayed, disrespected, or devalued, the instinct is to speak, demand justice, or be understood. Yet understanding can't be forced. True justice isn't found in winning an argument, but in the peace one retains when it's all over. Silence doesn't mean you have nothing to say. It means your actions have already said it all. A deeper effect of the silent walkaway is reaffirming the limits of the relationship. While many stay to avoid misunderstanding, those who leave quietly trust that those who truly matter will reflect and self-correct. They don't try to teach through debate, but through absence. Their void becomes a mirror, confronting the other with their own behavior, no longer masked by denial or blame. In professional or social settings, the silent departure is just as powerful. A worker doesn't need to revolt against a toxic environment. They just leave. A partner doesn't need to condemn. They simply stop collaborating. A leader needn't argue. They just withdraw from what no longer aligns. These acts protect one's emotional stability and signal unspoken standards. In the end, walking away in silence is the ultimate expression of self-respect, emotional mastery, and inner strength. It requires no outside approval, no applause, no defense. Precisely because it is wordless, it reverberates in the minds of those left behind. And sometimes, the thing that compels others to reflect, to change, isn't a battle of words, but the quiet absence of someone who once stood with unwavering integrity. Applying Stoicism to life isn't about reading ancient quotes and hoping your inner strength will magically grow. It starts with the smallest, most decisive acts, like learning to say no without guilt, walking away from a relationship when your worth is diminished, or simply staying silent when someone tries to provoke you just to test your reaction. I was once the person who always explained, always tried to please, always feared loss. And the more I did, the more I was taken for granted. Not because I lacked worth, but because I wasn't living within my own boundaries. Only when I began setting limits, from no longer tolerating disrespect to leaving when I wasn't valued, did I finally feel this truth. I didn't need to demand respect from others because I was living as someone who deserved it. Any of us can begin, not with perfection, but with consistency. Each day, if you can choose one practice, start with calm. From there, other boundaries will take shape. And one day you'll see, peace doesn't come from how others treat you, but from no longer allowing harm without consequence. If anything you've heard resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future content. This isn't just a space for ideas. It's a journey toward unshakable inner growth, without compromise. And if you ever have to choose between being loved or being respected, always choose respect, even if the first person who must give it is yourself. See you in the next video.